All right, folks, look away now if you don't want to get all anarchy about forks. As you know, we're working on finishing up that 1972 Honda CB750 K2, that lump in the background here. And one of the things, as you know, I go quite far down the rabbit hole about getting things right. One of the things was the forks that came with this just appeared to be a sort of homebrew concoction of bits and pieces that kind of didn't really work. Thanks to a couple of comments on the Honda CB750 forum on Facebook. Thanks, guys, you know who you are. We were able to finally sort of resolve the mystery, if you will. What you see here is the damper assembly. So essentially that's a piston with a spring and a valve or a guide. So when this bit sits inside the tube, obviously facing that way, when the bike compresses, in other words, you go over a bump or you push down on the handlebars, it reacts against that big spring, which uses this damper, which is sitting in oil, to soften the ride. And essentially, if I show you that piece, that is the bottom of the damper, the bolt that holds it all on to the bottom of the tube, and the actual damper assembly, or piston assembly, more aptly, because that's a piston ring, believe it or not, that sits in there. But that is not what came on this bike. The bike had these parts here, but was fitted with this weird steel tube and no damper. So one of the chaps on the forum said, have you looked inside the bottom of the fork stanchion, like all the way down the end there, to see if this bit essentially is wedged down there, because it does get quite dirty, and you know, you've got oil, figure that on the end there, this thing going up and down, you will get dirt and grime in there, and they do have a tendency to stick. So me being me, I pulled these apart, got a torch down there, and lo and behold, these two buggers. Now this is the very clean version, or the somewhat less filthy version, more aptly put. These were stuck on the end, so essentially picture that. It was stuck down the bottom of the fork stanchions. Now these are incorrect for a K3. This is a K3 fork tube, not a K2 fork tube. No problem. We're getting the correct K2 stuff to go on the bike. But that is the correct damper. And I think what's happened is somebody's grabbed maybe a Kawasaki damper or a Honda damper from another model, and tried to brace this whole assembly with just a random piece of steel pipe. That's literally, it was just fitted over there, stopping this moving, and then bottoming out on this, holding the whole thing in place. So if anybody has any suggestions, I'm really curious, was this a race thing? Did people do this to stop if you had a flat track bike and you weren't expecting much movement up and down, you just want it to be fairly rigid, was that a thing? Because on both fork stanchions, I have obviously two of these, one for each stanchion. I have two of these. I've got two of these assembly, and obviously two fork tubes, the top, snap ring, et cetera, to hold that main spring in place. But I only have one of these, and that was in my inventory. So I'm really curious to know, does this look like a racing modification? If I did that, does that look familiar to anybody? Because I have never seen anything like this, and these are really badly chewed up. You can see basically where this whole assembly must have smashed down on the top of this, kind of taking chunks, because this is aluminium and that's steel. So yeah, it's a real mystery. I'm constantly perplexed by stuff like this, but maybe there was a reason for it back in the day, who knows? Anyway, we will be fitting the correct Honda damper, so it fits on that way, on the fork. And we'll have these in storage for a K3 project, or K4, K5, K6, or K7, because they all use the same forks. And we will be fitting the correct forks right up there for this K2. They have a different mounting system for the brake caliper. They have a few other different bits. Also, while I'm going down the rabbit hole, let me show you some other really cool stuff. So you know how much I love using original parts. Let me show you some original parts that I've refurbished. So just to give you a quick idea of how deep down the rabbit hole we go, all of these components the original metal parts, caliper body, the mounting arm. This is not for a K2 either, that's a K3 or K4, 5, 6, 7. Master cylinder, etc. All of these are original parts that have been stripped of all of their components, like all this additional stuff, taken out, blasted back to bare metal, primed and coated by Coastal Abrasives. Thank you very much, Steve and the team. And then we've refurbished them using a combination of original hardware. So this is an original Honda lever. We have a rubber boot that goes on the end there. So it will end up looking like that. Rebuilt with a Honda master cylinder rebuilt kit. Reproduction lid, because the original lids all get very, very faded like that. And what you get left with is not necessarily new, but it's certainly very new-ish. And for a restoration, you know, again, we don't do concourse restorations. Maybe we will in the future at some point. We've got some additional K2 hardware coming in, including a little brace that fits under here. Basically, it takes up that hole right there and puts a little mounting plate across there to control the amount of damper that you can put to stop this thing moving around, because they did wobble a little bit. So that's all coming in, but this is an original Honda part. You can see we basically just stripped it, cleaned it, and it's ready for use again. So really enjoy this part of the restoration when we're dealing with, you know, original stuff we know is going to fit. This is the handlebar top clamp. So we have the idiot light holder underneath. That's just a mock-up fitting. It's missing a spacer plate that goes in the bottom. Would anybody notice? Probably not, but I would. So we're getting an original Honda one to go in there. We've got a original set of idiot light jewels, I guess would be the right term, and then a reproduction Honda faceplate here, because you can't actually buy this from Honda. It is made by third parties though, and this is just for reference. This replaces the very brown faded looking thing that was originally on that. So if I show you side by side, or maybe better like that, you can see just what a massive color difference it is. So that will get held on with the two-part epoxy. In this case, we've gone with original hardware, genuine Honda brake pads. So really, really nice there. Refurbished and stripped, blasted, thank you again, Doug, OCD. Caliper mounting arm, genuine adjuster. So this is the adjustment kit once it mounts up to the fork stanchion. So it's just temporarily mounted here. And all of this has been blasted back, reassembled and greased. We've got new Allen bolts coming in for this. These are correct, they're the correct length and everything, but they're not shiny. So we have shiny new ones. You can see new clips. So this is basically ready for just to deploy straight on the bike. And again, this is for a K3. The bike that we're restoring is a K2. So once the K2 parts come in, it's a slightly different mounting assembly. It's a little bit more complicated, but does the same thing more or less. We'll strip this caliper, the pads and everything else, and the adjuster, and mount it straight on the K2 mounting hardware. So that's just a quick insight into what I've been up to in the background. We're still waiting for gauges from Lionel Otto Instruments in Queensland. Those should be in this coming week. It's the Anzac Day and Easter long weekends. It's a double long weekend, EA Australia. So things are a little bit delayed coming back. But thought you'd like to see that. In the meantime, that's a few days worth of work right there. I think they look absolutely gorgeous, and they'll make the new bike owner very happy, I'm sure. Have a fantastic weekend, and lest we forget, huh? Cheers, everyone.